All right, today we're jumping into the memoir of a truly giant figure in psychiatry, Irvin Yalom. His book, Becoming Myself, isn't just a life story. No, it's way more than that. It's really an exploration of a question that I think kind of gets to all of us. How do we actually make sense of the life we've lived?
So, what makes a guy in his 80s decide to write his life story? I mean, really dig in. For Yalom, it was actually this one line from Charles Dickens. This idea that the closer we get to the end, the more we find ourselves circling back to the beginning. And for him, that wasn't just a nice quote. It struck a really deep chord and kicked off this whole journey of looking back.
And that journey really brings us to the core question we're looking at today. It's a question Yalom spent his entire career helping other people answer, and now, finally, he was turning it on himself. How does looking back, sifting through all those messy fragments of our past, actually help us figure out who we are today? Let's dig into his journey and see what he found.
Okay, Section 1, circling back to a beginning. See, Yalom found this strange thing happening. The older he got, the more these really early memories just started popping into his head, almost out of nowhere. He was, just like that Dickens quote, circling right back to the very start.
He'd always just assumed his early childhood memories were fuzzy because, well, it was a pretty unhappy time. But now something else was going on. Listening to his patients talk about their lives was acting like a trigger. It was unlocking his own memories, forcing him to look again at the very foundation of his own story. And he realized, wow, this whole thing is way more fragmented than I ever thought.
So what was that beginning he kept circling back to? Well, it was a tough one. We're talking about a childhood filled with poverty and shame in a really rough immigrant neighborhood in Washington, D.C.
And this wasn't some far-off, abstract idea of poverty. Nope. This was immediate. It was visceral. This was literally the scene waiting for him right outside his front door. And the squalor wasn't just on the street. It was inside, too. A constant crawling presence in his own home. You can just imagine what all of this created. A deep, profound sense of isolation. He felt like an outsider everywhere he went. And that feeling, that sense of not belonging, it would follow him for years. So the key thing here isn't just what he saw. It was this gut-level feeling of being completely out of place.
But what's so powerful here is the shift in his perspective over time. That shame he felt as a kid, as an adult, it completely transformed into this deep, almost heartbreaking empathy for his parents. He finally got it. He understood the incredible weight they were under as uneducated, penniless immigrants, and he felt this real regret for ever being embarrassed by them.
Okay, so how does someone come from that beginning and become the man he was? Well, Yalom traces it all back to a few key stories, a few themes that really became the building blocks for his entire adult life.
He really points to three big threads that shaped him. First, this deep-seated need to avoid conflict at all costs. It came from growing up in a place where his father taught him that running away was pretty much the only survival strategy. Second was the pure, absolute joy of escape when his family finally moved out of that neighborhood. It was this feeling of profound relief that he never forgot. And third, a real passion for books, for literature, for great stories. And that love of story is what ultimately pointed him towards psychiatry, a field all about the narratives of our lives. And this is such a powerful look at the connection between generations. You see, his father had actually been a poet back in Russia, but the brutality of war and immigration just crushed that creative life out of him. Yalom says he never once saw his father read a book. And yet, here's Irvin, who unknowingly picks up that creative torch and builds his entire career around the very thing his father lost, the power of a story. It's really incredible when you think about it.
All right, so just when we think we've got the whole story pieced together, Yalom does what a great therapist does. He throws a massive wrench in the works. He starts to question the very tool he's been using to build this whole narrative, his own memory.
This is a pretty shocking admission, right? He's basically telling us, hey, this memoir I'm writing, it's probably more fiction than fact. He's saying that the story he just shared, the one we've been following, it might not be the capital T truth. He's arguing our memories aren't like video recordings. They're more like stories we constantly edit and reshape over time.
And for him, this isn't just some abstract theory. He's seen it in his own life. He says he's shocked when he talks to his sister or his cousins and realizes they remember the exact same events in totally different ways. Of course, this is all backed up by decades of work with patients, watching them try to piece together their own pasts, and seeing just how
how fragile and changeable our own reality can be.
So, if our past is kind of a fiction and our memory can't totally be trusted, where does that leave us? Where do we find meaning? Well, for Yalom, the answer isn't about looking backward, it's about looking forward, to the legacy we leave behind.
He has this really powerful concept for this, and he calls it rippling. Just picture it, like when you throw a stone into a pond. Our actions, our ideas, our kindness, they don't just end with us. They ripple out, creating these concentric circles of influence that can touch people for years, maybe even for generations, and often in ways we never even know about.
And you can see these ripples so clearly in Yalom's own life. It's the influence his teachers, like a man named Jerry Frank, had on him. It's in his students, who are now out there carrying his ideas into the world. It's his patients, his 4 kids, his 7 grandkids. And there's this one perfect, tangible example of a ripple, his granddaughter, who was so inspired by him that she followed him into medicine. That's a legacy you can see and touch.
And so, we end up right where Yalom leaves us. If our meaning isn't just found in the stories we tell about our past, stories that might not even be completely true, but in the impact we have on the future, well then, the biggest question isn't just, who have I been? The real question is, what ripples are you creating right now? That's a pretty powerful thought to take with you, isn't it?